Hello, my colleagues and friends. It's 𝗧𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗿 inviting you for another epic episode of Matrix Momentum. I'm so thrilled to have today in the studio my great colleagues that are joining me from different parts of the world, but also that are able to share some amazing things that are changing in their parts of the world, as we're seeing not only positive transformation happening, people starting traveling, but also more and more action on the client side and consumer side. So we have here in studio Dr. of Future State, Shay, with us, joining us from Dublin, Ireland. How is everything going on, Shay? Please just give us a quick check-in and greetings from Dublin.
Everything's great, Izabela. Thank you for that. Delighted to be here as always, but all's great. This country is starting to open up. For a country that was very, very slow and locked down for a very long time, they're starting to pick up pace now. So there's a bit of excitement in the air. Non-essential retail is open. Businesses are getting back. And then the hospitality will be opening up over the next week or two. So life is starting to feel normal and everyone's excited. I just hope we're not counting our eggs before they're hatched.
That's fantastic. But it's also so great to see the lush green Ireland and everything blooming and seeing people outside in the nature and the great photos and images. So I'm just like super psyched for all of you as well for us to enjoy that virtually for at least for a second. That's awesome. We're also having our guardian of dream space join us from Berlin, Aravinth. How is everything in Germany and in Berlin specifically?
Yes, Shay mentioned, I think the gastronomy, the restaurants, they are open, but and a lot of these public spaces are open, but you have to take the fast rapid test within 24 hours, and it's provided by the German government. I think there are 15,000 test centers were created, so every 100 meters there's one that you can quickly take, and just to make sure that you don't spread and still you can enjoy the time. And good part is that weather is a bit better, 22, 23 degrees. So finally we could go out in flip-flops and without jackets, and also schools and kindergarten, especially kindergarten is open, which is a big relief for us. For our son to go to kindergarten and just socialize with other kids. So there's a hope, and but yeah, other side of the world where I operate is not good, going really bad, and hope that it gets better as well.
Yes, it's such a great contrast, and I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm so glad because kids need to be kids and in such without a kids, but in the same time, you're right, not everybody had the luxury and opportunity to have the level of precautions that Germany instituted to prevent and support their people. As you mentioned, other parts of the world is having challenges, and that's something we're going to also quickly depict in our conversation today. And now we're also having someone who is joining us from Riyadh, Unleash Master himself, Ahmed, Khaled. How are you? How is everything going on in Saudi Arabia?
Always grateful and always amazing, very positive. Everything is beautiful around us. Good news that there are 11 countries. The lockdown was unlocked. So between Saudi Arabia and this kind of countries, so I believe that we will come back to our normal life, and people will come travel again. Vaccines here also, it's almost 40% got distributed. So I believe that business even is coming back to the normal state. So I believe that we'll come back normal to the normal state very, very soon. Always positive as usual.
That's great. It's very important to keep optimism going and support other people. So when they don't feel so optimistic, they at least can feel it for the moment. But it's also wanted to just to point it out for us here in the United States, we have different states that are doing so much more progressively vaccination, and they're much more under control in terms of percentage also vaccinated individuals. Some of them are still lagging. Some of people are, despite accessibility, refuse to do so. So we have all kinds of components that are creating complexities, right? And as a result, we're also seeing very interesting trends. But ultimately, everyone wants to go out and enjoy beautiful weather. Everyone wants to travel. And that's what really brings not anymore just the domestically, but we're talking about international travel. We're talking about opportunities to see loved ones, opportunities to also go to conferences, or for some people truly to return back home because they were stuck and unable to even go back home, let alone to their working environment. So we're going to be talking about that in a second. But today's topic, it's very important to really shed some light because we're seeing some very interesting dynamics that are going on. And more than ever, as we're seeing complexities around decision making, because so much that is going on in the world, the speed, right? Because sometimes, again, the crisis doesn't slow down, requires such a great decision making, importance to navigate complexities, also to assess these risks accurately and correctly, but also to really cut these time-consuming processes that we're seeing, right? For so many things that are being prolonged for so long. So with that in mind, we're obviously looking at the power of advisory during turbulent times. We're seeing so much that is also taking not only emotional toll, an emotional decision, as well as sometimes errors and wrong decisions. We're also seeing quite a bit of disagreements and lack of cooperation. As a result, a lot of lack of alignment, right? But ultimately, things shifted to some point that even we see shift in visions and strategic plan and, of course, execution. So with that in mind, I would love to hear from you, Shay, if you don't mind sharing a little bit from your perspective. What trends do you see with your clients, and specifically, obviously, what's going on in Europe and broader scope with advisory right now? Because we're seeing traditional advisory being implemented on multiple different levels, from board of directors that constitute organization and advice organization. Then with the C-suite, we also have advisory, and then we have consultative advisory from external help that is often also being leveraged. So please take a stage.
Thanks, Izabela. It's actually, I think this is a fascinating question because there's multiple answers to this one, right?
Yes.
I think in general, like a lot of the advisory companies haven't been as busy in general. A lot of companies have cut back on this type of help and support, and some possibly warranted, but some not, because like if you think of what the advisory companies, the good advisory company do, like they will help leaders define what they need to do next, right? It's so important to get that passion, that strategy, and that vision, because things have changed. They need help to do this. They can't do it alone. And where this really adds value is that if you think of advisory companies that are working across multiple sectors and lots of clients, they have a phenomenal amount of industry knowledge and experience that they can share. What's happening now, what's going to come forward in the next while. So this is something I believe that companies don't always appreciate the value that a good advisory company can offer, you know? So I believe that it's cut back. The industry has cut back. A lot of industries have cut back on this. What I'm seeing a little bit of more now over recent times is more consultancy work, where there has been a bit of advisory and then it goes into planning and execution. So all their, I call them foot soldiers, come in and help the companies in the short term build that exciting plan and start that execution. And that's where I'm seeing it's all like the upfront work getting done, and then they're sort of pushing back. Instead of staying hands-on further down, they're pushing back, because I think a lot of people are still watching their pockets. But I'm hoping that will change over the coming months with everything opening up. There's a lot more excitement in the industry. There's a lot more confidence. So, and consumer, I've seen it with some of the figures that I've seen. Some of you guys have been posting, and some of my network on what the spend is. One of my networks posted the amount of money that some of the big online retailers have made over the last while, and it's just, you know, and it's growing still. So there's more excitement. Now, what I hope that excitement will turn into action on the ground, buying products and buying services in the country to support the indigenous manufacturing and service providers.
That is fantastic. A great share. And I'm glad to hear excitement, but I'm also curious to hear what is Aravinth experiencing in his world. And obviously, because he is operating on the global scale, so I'm just curious also, what do you see happening in fast-growing startups and disruptors in the industry?
Yeah, so the topic is very aligning to our to what happened in the last weeks for me. So recently become an advisory to a space tech startup to help them to tell their story, maybe, yeah, as a growth hacker. Actually, the job is to help them to get investment, but before getting an investment, you need to help them to tell their story. And so I'm already an advisory for 23 organizations around the world, and this is 24th. I was not ready to take a new challenge, but this was very interesting, so I decided to become an advisory for this organization for a few reasons. Yeah, so first of all, the startup and the business, the tech industries, or even not only like digital tech, but also space tech, has been a topic in the recent days, and recently even political interventions mentioning about UFOs and Mars landers and things like that's happening. People all of a sudden interested in space than before. Maybe there was a time like 1969. So, but how do we? But if you look at the space industry itself, it's again dominated by a small group of people. So I took recently in this year, early last year, a kind of a goal that I said I want to make space more colorful. So make space more accessible for people all around the world, from all those underserved community. So with that, I took this challenge. So when I started talking to this team, and they have developed technology as an electric, so space is also getting electrified, space industry. So it's an electric engine for space rockets, so to say, because we have challenges in that. So when I talked to the team, and it's a purely technical team, and they have developed a solution and tested it with things, and they crowd invested, and they want to go to the next step, and they were seeing that, okay, this is our pitch deck, and go and reach out to the investor. But the whole point that I understood that they are proper technical people, they didn't even communicate that well to me, So the science communication, the storytelling part in their technology, this is missing because they are just focused on technology development. They're not thinking about other aspects. So in that way, I just told that, we are living in a time that for my other organization, I raised more money through the content that I delivered. So through the stories, than reaching out to a traditional investment way. So with this, I was able to help them. And they recently, just in the last 2 days, they started several open events and contents, and they started publishing it. And then it's, there is a traction that we can see. It's been, the campaign is running now for 2 weeks, and they raised almost 280,000 euros. And so that storytelling part is the advice that I'm giving to organization.
Wow, that is such an interesting contrast, and I'm so glad you shared that too, because what is happening in obviously in trenches, and how everything is impacted, as you pointed out, from government entities, and how is everything structured, what is the reach, and how often we have to really think about it, not only what we're producing, but how we're disseminating, and how that is integrated across the organization and across the globe. I'm sure that now our Unleashed Master here will have a lot to share himself. And we have greetings from our great friends, and including our Matrix Momentum.
Yes, we missed him.
Unfortunately, he could not be with us, but he is partaking at least virtually and saying hello. So thank you so much, Ahmed. for being here with us in spirit and then showing your support. So thank you very much. We're always great to see
Brothers also.
as well everybody else that are here with us. We'll look forward to your questions you may have. But now we're going to go to Unleash Master and hear his perspective on what's going on, not only in the Middle East, but things that are happening in Asia and other parts of the world during the current times in terms of scope and need and demand around advising and proper advisory in order to navigate complexities.
Sure. I love the topic for today because I believe that we are living this on a daily basis and these challenges on a daily basis. And I will not focus too much on the strategical or the business plans or the targets that we are talking about, but I'll keep the focus on the emotional intelligence that we have to develop between our people, because I believe everything is being driven because of leaders in the organization. And if leaders, they have the possibility and they have the ability to move things smoothly without any pressure, without affecting the employee mental health, this is the right way. And I'll tell you just the stories, and I see this as a trend inside the organization, and I see it's like seasonal each quarter. You know that the strategical plans or the strategical targets, it's been cascaded, I would say, like annually. It's not strategic, too much strategical, but I would say, let's say that we have the annual targets for the company itself. And you will see the employee got affected each quarter, each half of the year, of the annual year, financial year. You will see that if the company doesn't achieve the target for the quarter, the leaders at this point, the functions or the department itself is imposing a pressure, unbelievable pressure on their employee that affect their mental health drastically. And they reach to a point, to a closed corner, that they don't have anything to be done. And at the same point, they don't listen. And this is create a big hectic inside the organization itself and between the leaders. So my advice and my especially in that time, in the pandemic time and the uncertainty that it's we got absorbed it from each part in the world. My advice is just listening. People, they have to stay in the round table, listening to each other, and understand what are the challenges that we have in the market itself, and uncertainty that we have in our day-to-day operations, and work very closely with their employee. Again, I see, as I told you, because we are speaking about the trend itself, it's each quarter we have to remove these trends. We have to focus on employee mental health, as we spoke in the first point, and by this way we will be able to move to the next level. Otherwise, if you keep moving or just managing targets, I'm telling you, people will burn out sooner or later, and they will be out. They will not stay for a long time in the company itself because they cannot release this pressure. This is my point of view.
And I would just like to add to that, I think everybody's experiencing that at the moment, and in fact, I think leaders are too. I think they are really struggling. There's so much pressure on leaders now, and sometimes when there's pressure on leaders, you're right, Khaled, they don't execute correct, and they may put the wrong type of pressure on the people underneath. So I think they're under pressure, especially if they've got investors to keep happy. Investors aren't forgiving. They want to see their return. They want to see their dividends. They don't want to be not getting a return because they have pressures. Everybody has pressures. So this is where I really think that leaders can really leverage the value of some sort of advisory on a personal level or a strategic, or even both, because it's so important that they're able to take that step out of their business and look down and not get sucked in, because that's what's happening now. They're all getting sucked in. They need to spend more time sitting back and looking down on the business and figuring out how it all moves together, and get advice, get help to do it. You don't have to do these things on your own. You really don't. And that's why I think some people think it's a challenge. I have to. If I can't do it, I'm not good enough. They need to get out of that mindset and accept help.
Yeah. And go ahead. You can go ahead.
I just wanted just to say that is an excellent point, and I'm glad that because we're looking this holistically, right? We're looking not only what's going on top, but what's going on all the way to the bottom. What is looking 360 degrees overview. And I love what Rolis here shared, the healthcare recruitments recovered last fall, but he is also now seeing the more planning, more really long-term planning, more new strategic planning due to changes that occurred that we have to take into consideration are happening right now in 2021. And with that in mind, we're seeing shifts, and I can tell you right now what is going on with a lot of companies in the United States, but in North America in general. We're seeing a lot of departure of seasoned executives. Board of directors are dictators also on a lot of the elements, what's going on within organization. Besides just those external stakeholders, as you were mentioning, Shay, and in terms of the what's those stakeholders wanted to happen and the pressure to deliver, right? But it's also a huge adjustment. What now we can really justify, what actually we can really do, right? Is it realistic, or can we really push for a little bit more? Or how we're pushing, where we're pushing, and where the opportunities are. So that is what's constant reassessment, strategically looking on the playing field of what is working, what is not working, and more than ever, that needs to have that very honest, transparent conversation between board of directors, C-suite, as well as executives who are then implementing with their teams and middle management and rest of the team within organization. And right now we're seeing also interesting trends, and I'm glad you're bringing that up, points of mental health and pressures and anxiety, because people feel like not only their longevity is at stake, obviously their jobs, their positions, but also pressures that are going on at their home, in their own working environment. And for so many people, this is taking for too long, right? So why is advisory now actually changing the shape? It's not anymore what it used to be, and it's not anymore just linear. And I want everybody to understand that, because even if you had external top guns coming in an organization tackling one segment of it, now it's a more and more need to really look at holistically everything and seeing where the gaps are. And some places are tremendous, and where overlaps are, and where we can really adjust the game so we're not repeating things, right? So with that in mind, I would love to hear, and we can go, anybody who wants to answer on this or share the story, because obviously all of you stepped in not only in leadership roles to support in your capacity, either with your employer or with your clients. And also Aravinth mentioned how much he works on advisory already and advised different groups, and how complex that was, because he had to take into consideration that government regulations, different country conditions, different restrictions that occurred during the current time, either from COVID or just political agendas or economical agendas or things that they needed to institute, right? So any stories that really show how they can navigate this effectively, the things that you see that were super beneficial in your roles and where you stepped up in that advisory capacity.
Well, I'm happy to give it a try, Izabela. Like, I genuinely believe leaders and businesses have had a really tough time of it, and some have excelled and some haven't, right? And the companies that have excelled, from the research I've been doing over this, because I've been quite fascinated with this subject, is that the companies have always had really good people, like experiences. They've had really good bonds. They've had good programs of work to increase that collaboration, not just within a single team, but cross-functionally across the entire organization. Those companies have rid the storm quite well. Yes, there was an upset, but now the other companies are catching up. But see, here's the thing, right? Like, it's not just about what's happening in the marketplace and what's happening in the crisis, the globe now. Obviously, things are opening up, but it's how people communicate, excuse me, on the ground. Like, that whole dynamic has changed. People have had to upskill, have to learn to do this like video facing stuff that they've never been exposed to before. They've had to learn new skills. So everything is moving super fast. And I always talk about, if you want to speed up, you got to slow down first. But unfortunately, the market is driving that. The working environment, the economy, everything is driving the speed of change at the moment. And it's a fascinating subject because you have to attack it on multiple levels. Where's your business going? How do you bring your teams with you? How do you make sure your teams can actually do the work? So I still think this place is evolving, Izabela, drastically, and especially with the people side in terms of what's the future of work, what's the mega trends. Is it a flat organization? Is it less sort of middle management? Is it more subject matter experts? Is it more technology driven? So there's huge elements that need to be considered. And if you ask me what's the right thing to do, my answer to that is, well, each company has to define what they need to do for their business at that particular time, because it will be a mixed match of all that. It's just about getting the cocktail and ingredients right that suits them. I don't know if that's answered your question, but I just think there's lots of questions to be answered.
Yes, and it's a great start, and thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And you're right that it's each individual scenario, but there's just being cognizant around and knowing where all of those pain points and understanding what is going on, not just the trends for the larger players, but just understanding underlying issues. Then we can serve and support and advise better, right? And then others can be prepared as a result to do better too. So Aravinth, you were mentioning quite a bit earlier. So do you mind explaining a little bit more? How did you arrive to some great solutions and great quick wins during these challenging times so that others can focus what the wins could be, or how they can make some strides forward, even though if they're small, so that things are not put on hold or completely disrupted negatively?
Yeah, so I would just go with the startup perspective, hard tech startup perspective, not the social enterprises. So the one thing that helped me during the advising is telling a real story that happened, not about the success, but about the failure. So that really helped a lot of people. So if a company, an organization founders are struggling, that okay, what they should do at that moment, if it's about the merging and acquisition, or if some investors coming and asking to clean that cap table completely and remove all the crowd investors and initial community out, or any kind of these kind of, or if there is a challenge in selling their product when there are corporates selling the same in a consumer product. So in those places, for me, how I help them is to tell failure and success stories, which are real, not like this imaginary stories, but like what you see in the internet, but like real stories that happen in the local ecosystem, so that they can relate to it. And then they can even, I could even connect these people, these struggling founders and leaders to those people who have already overcome those similar situations, because most of the time it's kind of repeating. And what they want is relatability, and they want to know that, okay, someone like me, someone like them has also solved that challenge, and that's what they wanted. And that's how I help companies by advising on these small medium enterprises.
Wonderful, that's great. Thank you for sharing that addition. And how about you, Ahmed? What have you been doing to support and step up more into that advisory, so that as a result things are having better outcome and a more proactive versus reactive?
Sure. Part of from that point, Izabela and team, I believe it's about reflection. And there are some things inside the corporate or inside the organization itself. Many people, they don't track it, or they don't take care about it. And the reason what I'm saying like that, most leaders in the organization, they have the tenacity to refuse to ask for external help. What do I mean here? That, okay, for advisory, it costs me a lot to have this kind of stuff, and we can move the ball inside because we have the experience, we have everything, so we move the ball. And when it comes to reality, you will find that the cost of advisory itself and the cost that they pay for consultancy to have many specific problems inside the organization, you will find that they pay too much for consultancy. And if they think for little bit, not too much, I'm saying for a little bit, if they have a well-experienced advisory on that point, they could avoid the cost of consultancy, and they realize this, at delayed stage. they couldn't take the decision at this stage. So what I'm advising the people or the organization right now, don't be afraid to ask for advising, because you don't have many things. It's intangible right now. You cannot measure it. But I'm telling you, in the long term, you will most probably you will have some challenges. So don't be afraid to ask for support outside from advisory, instead of doing some consultancy, and the cost of the consultancy, if you replicate it, it will be too much relatively to advisory. This is the message that I want to give it to organization who listen to us today.
That is a great point. And one of the things I wanted to just expand here, what we're seeing, just the fact that you need to have external expertise for a lot of people is reflection that they're lacking certain skill. Then ego gets in the game. And a lot of times if we're overplay our game, that we're overqualifying ourselves and saying that we can do everything, we will fall short, because absolutely we cannot know everything. And I love what Shay earlier mentioned, how much of expectations are there and how much problems are on the table. So something has to give, right? In order to continue to have that collaboration and share vision and less conflicts and more alignment. It's also a requirement sometimes actually just because there's so much speeding up. Think about it, playing the chess game with 15 players and every 5 seconds somebody's changing the position on the board. That is to some organization exactly how much landscapes change. So you have to almost capture certain snapshots in order to slow down, to speed up, and also to really grasp what is going on. Are we really focusing on the right thing? Are we looking at the right position? Is this really what is going on right now? Advisory shouldn't be, definitely not something the organization should be ashamed of, because having that neutral third party helps tremendously. Specifically right now, because so many organizations are still handling their post-mergers and acquisitions. They're still trying to integrate their teams. They're still trying to figure it out who is coming to work in office, who is not. So again, so much moving parts. And now having that calm, collected experts in very specific niche in areas that can really accelerate not only their learning curve or their exposure for what they need to be looking at and from which perspective, to truly arrive cohesively to agreed choice and decision. And that is where then happens the magic. Because a lot of times, yes, we get external consultancy to do something, but is it really most prioritized, most important thing? And a lot of times, why do we even go for consultancy? Why we don't have internal capacity? And right now, I just want to share something. We have seen right now so much trends in North America. And I want to just say before I jump into that, thank you so much, Bibinas, for joining us. So great to see you as well, Michael. Welcome back. Ahmed, great to see you again. Welcome back. Sanjan, that is also joining us as well. So what I also want to just make sure is that, as you said, it's costly, but costs you more losing key players, costs you more making very damaging decision, or not acting or reacting as quickly as we needed to do, right? So right now, new trend that we're seeing, we're going to see a lot of migration of existing amazing talent. We're already seeing huge migration of executives leaving their posts midst of all of that. And then who do you now hire, or who do you promote within? And then that takes a process and adjustment, right? So disruptions happen also internally. We also seen a lot of employees are jumping ship and going in different directions, or taking a break because they're being burned out. As we know, again, mental health is such a high right now obstacle issue, specifically in the United States. I'm not saying that is only in the United States, but I'm speaking from environment that I'm playing quite a bit in right now, obviously being in the country and seeing reactions and then seeing a lot of data that is really alarming and troublesome. So then how do we do that? Good advisor, we have to look at on the top tier, like think about as umbrella that holds all these different layers of organization and also protects all the layers of organization, right? Because you have to have always someone above you that is there looking at specific things to provide that safety net and security, but also shields you from everything else that is going on. Because right now, again, we know sometimes we don't know much.
Yes, I want to add something also, Izabela, into that point. Our mind and even psychologically, we are wired to have better for us to have to avoid the losses or pain rather than then gain again. So most people and most organizations, they prefer to avoid any loss rather than gain again. What do I mean here? I give you like a short story happened with my friend. What happened? They are working in a big organization at this point, and at the beginning of the year they were asking for advisory, giving them about something about their strategical buying, their strategical sourcing, and the cost of advisory relatively it was very high, relatively for them. They see it's very high, and after 4 months they had a big hit in their margin, especially comes from the material, the commodity, because the commodity price came high suddenly. And if we reflect, and he told me, if he reflect the cost that accommodated with their advisory, because they have this experience and they can give them like direction, maybe they can have a build-up for a stock, or they can have a long-term contract at this point, they can work on that point. If they just compare the cost of advisory itself versus the cost that had a hit in P&L, it's relatively ignored. So people, they have to understand that there are many things that it's intangible, but it hits at the end of the day your targets and your profitability and margin in the company itself. It's intangible and no one will reflect on this. That's why I'm saying that leaders, they have to reflect. They have to understand. Trust me, it's not only about giving you advice. No, people, they have experience and they have a vision and they can give you a direction on that. So don't have an ego. Listen, and you can move into that, because I'm saying these people will help you by their experience to move into your strategical plans. That's why I want to put this point into the story itself.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because what I love to see, Khaled, when you look at things like this is, project work. Like if you're doing a project, one of the first things you do is risk mitigation and return on investment scenarios. So if you can build some advisory and show that advisory is going to strategically help you make better decisions, so you can pull prices, costs, lead times, everything in, it's a exactly. Cost worth paying, And this is where you said a great word, protection, Izabela. And we've had conversations about this before, but I always believe like the advisors will help protect leaders from themselves, because they're stuck in doing the do so much that they sometimes can't see the wood from the trees. And it's so important that it's not just what they do, it's the optics of what they do on the ground. They're breathing this message to their team and then doing something completely different. And there's one example I'd like to share where like there's a lot of companies, big organizations have cut costs drastically. There's hiring embargoes saying we've no money, but then they go out and do things with their money and it's in public view. And yes, the optics are wrong. Now, I'm not saying what they did was wrong, but it's the optics of what they did. So it's all about how can we help companies make sure not only that they're doing the right thing, but the optics are the message. Everything is right. Everything is honest. Everything is portrayed the way it should be. So there's no ambiguity in what's happening. So I really think leaders need to be protected from themselves.
That is excellent point. Because what I'm seeing also right now, advisors are not just those Top Gun experts that are detached and emotional. They're the ones that also care, and they also bring the calmness and their expertise, also how to handle complex situations. And I have a scenario actually that just happened. Nonprofit organization, they lost the funding. People were sick, so much drama. They could not get around the table just to sit down and have a civil conversation, just because certain conflicts went so long not being addressed, and then everything just exploded. And I heard from two different people with this organization, and they shared quite a different perspective. What was the root cause? Yeah. And I said, okay, I can offer something for you. I can have a conversation if you open as a neutral party. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but unless you're seeking after hearing and exhibiting what's going on, I can just draw some conclusions and I can tell you what I'm seeing, and from the behavioral standpoint, as well as what you're trying to do and how to move the needle. So there was a very interesting dynamic. And finally, it was agreed upon, because both parties had a trust in me, and they did advocate, and they did say, let's just have at least neutral party, because they were hoping, if nothing else, behavior of others will be much more appropriate, so will not be as much combative and much more conflict driven, which really worked from that perspective. But again, if we're not addressing elephant in the room, the real problems, who cares, right? We cannot just drink tea and pretend that everything is fine. And that is what that resistance actually did bring to the light, that conflict. So now we have a positive conflict that can really help to create a little bit of friction, so we can really pivot and finally get to the bottom of something and resolve something. But you also have a toxic conflict, which now a lot of organizations even more so are delaying their process and decision making. So what exactly happened here is that there were a lot of powerful female leaders, but there are also male leaders who were having their own stance, and they were looking things from very different point of view. But when I painted the picture, what I was hearing, one side versus the other, and how this picture now it's formed into united view, there was the huge aha moment, because they were even saying similar things, or they were after the same thing because they passionately cared, obviously, but they could not see it, that they're actually talking about the same thing, only from different perspective. And I guess sometimes the tone, the voice, the decision, the words, as well as taking reins and then running with it while leaving others behind, they created so much delusion around trust, right? It's like, do we have the trust? Do we understand what somebody's intentions are? And ultimately, how is this impacting service? People that we're delivering service to. And that really made a huge shift too, because that bleeds through. We know that bleeds through, right? You can't hide it. Clients sense that. They sense something's off. And specifically, if it's supposed to be a service that's supposed to help others to feel better, you can't make them feel better if you're not doing better yourself and if you're in turmoil. So again, as a result, they gave opportunity not only to have advisory sit-down discussion, but also something that was going to take a little bit of time and appetite to say, we truly do have a problem, and it's okay to have the neutral third party. And it's okay actually to start looking things from different perspective. Sometimes we're so much in, as you pointed, Shay, so that we don't see bigger view. And who suffers that? Everyone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think it's I really do believe it's a challenging time for leaders, Izabela. Like, obviously this whole situation has been unprecedented. Nobody's expected, but I think it's really showing out the good leaders from the poor leaders, and hopefully those poor leaders now can see what they need to do. I hope so, because it's the people on the ground that suffers. A lot of leaders are protected. They're very protected in their roles. They're comfortable, but it's always the people on the ground that suffer, and they're all and I always say this out straight to clients, because they're the people with the knowledge. They're the people with the expertise, the experience of knowing what to do. There's always a better way. The only way you'll find out the better way is if you engage with these people. You have to motivate them to offer good information. If you don't, they'll just come in and exchange time for money, or worse, they'll cut back in contribution and get institutionalized, and then that's contagious. So there's a real job for leaders to do at the moment. And the first is always to get everything under the hood working well. And that starts with a really strong collaborative working environment, and that's a challenge. That's a challenge. If it doesn't exist there at the moment, that's a big challenge for companies.
Or if it doesn't exist to full capacity because everything else is at full capacity, right? So that's immediately going to break down everything else, and it's going to hinder the speed of everything else that needs to happen. So with that in mind, what would be some of the advice, tangible advice from your experiences as we tackle on some of these issues for either leadership teams or management that is really finding themselves in these situations? Because I was mentioning earlier to you, I'm having interest in a lot of leaders reaching out to me and really asking for help. And that is really first sign in my mind, obviously, they're recognizing that their threshold is, or their cup is full, not only emotionally, but also mentally, physically, mentally, spiritually, because so many of them feel burnout as well. And then also they're having a hard time leaving or stepping away to go to vacation or doing something because things might unravel. So I'm curious, what do you see?
Okay, I think at this moment, Izabela, leaders, they have to identify their real strategic plans and strategic targets. And my advice to have a gap assessment. They should have assessment on the targets. Is it achievable, or if any target that they can see it's uncertain and maybe it will not be achieved accordingly, they should seek advice. And don't look in. I'm saying advice from everywhere. People advice, the system process, long term, all of this. They have to identify all of this and seek the advice itself. This is will allow them to identify the gaps and their challenge accordingly. But looking it into normal way and getting advice one time ahead like that, I don't think they if they see based on their experience, because I assume that leaders on these leadership positions, for sure, we cannot deny their experience and their expertise in this point. But they have to be very clear with themselves. They have to be very credible with themselves, and they don't be afraid to seek advice. So gap assessment, move into advising. This will eliminate many struggles in the short term accordingly. This is, I would say, this is my point of view.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. How about you, Aravinth?
Yeah, so in my point of view, like advisors or mentors or gurus, they should be part of like your day-to-day life in your business, and you should not reach out to them only when you need, because you need to especially build this rapport or trust building process that takes a lot of time. Because most of the time, a lot of organizations have dozens of advisors, but they never listen to the advisor because they never build the trust with the advisors. So you need to also give that time to build the trust with the advisors. And in coming from, I'm just giving an example on the social enterprise side. On that side, advisors have to also push those people a little bit to take those decisions, because it's that's where they see that, okay, there are so many options on the table and that people are still confused. And if you have the trust and if you have the relationship and the rapport built with that person you're advising and getting advices as well, and then it also helps you to take a cut and dry decision in many places. Otherwise, still there are so many options and confused about which one to go. So my advice about advisory is to build a trust with your advisory and advisees.
No, and God, I'm laughing because I'm going to tell a story that is so on point, Aravinth. Like, because if you don't build that rapport and you get this advice, you're not going to listen to it because there's no trust, right? So you have to build that. And I'm laughing at a project that I did a number of years ago for the Irish Postal Service. I spent a long time doing an assessment, on what they should do next as a strategy for their business, right? So I spent a long time putting this report together. It was a mixture of operations and commercial, and it took me a long time. I signed off on it, and then I finished the project. I presented everything to the board of directors and told them what they should do, and I gave them the reason why. The return on investment, it was actually the investment strategy was going to be a net cost because they had property they could sell, right? So it was cost neutral to them. So it made financial sense, right? And there was huge money to be made, right? But I went off and left that project. Then they hired another consultant from another country to do the same thing, So they got more of the same results. And they still didn't do anything after that report, So, but this is, and I'm laughing because advice is great, but you got to do something with it. You got to make decisions, because like there's three decisions: a good decision, a bad decision, and no decision. And the worst decision is no decision, right? It's procrastination. And you need to develop. And this is one thing I've learned from that myself, because we've all been in situations where we've been stuck. There's one thing that I've learned about when you're given advice, you need to put some criteria against it to see, does it fit your risk appetite or capacity, first of all? Is it feasible? Is it tangible? And what do I need to do to make it those things? If not, is it something else I need to do? You need to act. You can't just leave it foster in the back of your head. You need to make a decision for good or bad.
That is brilliant. And what I love, and now to tie all of this together, you spot on, Aravinth. Don't wait when you're in crisis and turmoil to scream and look for advisors and experts to help you to get you out of that situation. That is something you should be cultivating and building relationship and having proactive, preventative way. So then you always have sounding board and expertise. That's why we have these executive masterminds, for example. That's why we have a specific coaching of executives and different other avenues for individual level. But by then you should already have a trust, and 99% who they usually turn to already someone that they know. But the problem is maybe 3 people on C-suite will know that individual feel comfortable, but maybe others would not because they have opposition, or they just don't want to change, or they have something else in mind, right? So that's also with the good advisor. It's not just the building the trust, but also creating and helping to bring team together. So it is on the end of the day cohesive decision by everybody around that table, and then decision that they decide to truly take a stance and move forward with it, right? And then when that is implemented. But this reminds me, okay, guys, all of us were kids at one point. How many times parents will give us amazing advice and we ignored, and we ignored, and we ignored, and we got hurt, and we had hurt, and hard hurt, and eventually after we got hurt so many times, we decided, okay, it's enough. Maybe it's a better way to play with the boys and soccer ball, which I did, and get my shins bruised and whatnot, and scratches on my legs, which ultimately was like, that is the outcome, right? But at the same time, I'm just using some analogies. When we were kids, as adults, we also have a similar things. And when we feel like we're not ready, I guess it's not as hot, it's not as alarming, it's not as pressure driven. And then in reality is, oh my goodness, right now, oh my God, now we're losing control on all levels, right? Because it's hard to contain it. Yeah. So,
but that doesn't stop us kids, Izabela. When I set up my first business with a good old friend of mine, and like we went through the last recession, and both our fathers knew each other, and they were both entrepreneurs themselves. And do you think we listened to them? They used to have great fun catching up with each other, laughing at us, because they told us so many times not to do something, we do it. And then you have to walk the walk. You have to walk the walk, and then, or talk the talk and then walk the walk. You know, you only find these things out for yourself. But like, I remember there's been many times where I'd walk in, my dad said, well, how did that work out? And then I'd actually make up an excuse. I wouldn't tell him the truth, because I would just get that, I told you so.
And sometimes right now, because all stakes are so high, risk is so high, we don't have a luxury. So we really have to then understand, what role do we play? Are we partnering? Are we actually collaborating? Are we showing up to really solve solution? Or, of course we can disagree, we can show different points of view, but ultimately that's what helps, right? We're taking into consideration all these different points of view and finding the best choice based on what we know. But if we're not doing that, and everybody's pulling and pushing on their end, what do we have? Nothing. We don't have a team. We don't have a support. And we don't definitely have a successful business, don't we?
No.
Anything else, gentlemen, that you'd like to add before we wrap this great session for today? I just wanted to say how much I'm thrilled to see some great contributions and collaborations here with your wonderful comments, Coach Kenneth. Great to see you with us. Michael, great to see you again. Ahmed, I'm sorry we were not able to join us in the live session today, but great to hear your participation remotely. Sanyan, I'm sorry, Ahmed, Asim, and as well as Bibanez, and we also had a Nidal. Nidal, always great to have you here with us and sharing your wonderful perspective. Rollis, such a great surprise. I'm just super, super excited you could do that as well. And everybody else, if I miss anyone, please don't take hold against me. We will definitely be commenting afterwards, and we'll look forward to any questions you may have. So any other closing remarks, gentlemen, before we wrap up for today?
Well, I think if companies are struggling to know whether they need help or not, that's the first clue that they do need help. And I think whatever, they should always look for the opportunity for help, whether they take it or not, but at least it opens their mind and their awareness that there's help there. And then they can start like speculating and narrowing down the field of what they could get help with. But always look for the return. What are you going to get? If you do get help, what is the return going to be? And is it worth it?
That is excellent one. And that return is not always black or white. And sometimes that return is exponential. So you have to use different criteria how you measure that return. And I want to advise everybody highly to really look your matrices and your tracking devices, how you're doing, making sure you're truly tracking the right things and with the right way. How about you, Unleash Master?
I would give a recommendation, just my closing. I would say do something different with the same circumstances, since we cannot change circumstances, but we can change ourselves. So don't be afraid, or don't have this kind of ego to ask for advice, because this will eliminate many things in the future, or it will align your strategical plan. So I'm asking everybody, don't be shy to ask for advice.
Brilliant. But pay attention who you're asking for advice, right? As they say,
Sure.
you don't want to ask about marital advice person that never been married, or you don't want to ask people that never managed flat financial portfolio and they're broke about how to make millions of dollars, right? So that is also a caveat there too.
For sure, because if I'm the place for advice, if I will ask for advice for money, for sure I will do my surveys. I will not go for anybody, for sure.
Because we need some people that walk that talk and already been there and done that, right? Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
And how about you, Aravinth?
Yeah, so like as we discussed already, like if you go to a family doctor, you get a better suggestion, because the person knows the history, right? There's the complete history of you, and rather than you go to a new doctor, they would suggest you things it may not even work for you. So it's all about building the trust and relationship and rapport with your advisors, to have them in each and every steps, not only when it's needed, and so that they can help you to make informed decision in the right time, in the right place. And sometimes advisors may not help you to make the decision, they make the decisions for you, and that's also good in many places.
Brilliant. I love this brilliant group. As you guys can see, I'm armed with amazing colleagues here at Matrix and Matrix Advisory Group, because it's an opportunity always to come from different perspectives, because even though we have vast business experience, every single person has a specific expertise. And when we do speak from those expertise, that is what really makes tremendous difference and impact for these situations that so many of us find ourselves in. So please know and depict where the true problem is. If you're not sure, assess it properly and ask experts in that particular area to give you their humble opinion and really give you a 360 review of what is going on. And you will do magically awesome. So my dear colleagues, wish you a fantastic rest of the week, and I cannot wait for the next hot episode of Matrix Momentum. Everyone that participated today, it's absolutely awesome to see you with us, and I cannot wait for more of your comments and questions. And until next time, stay safe, well, and keep going ahead. Game on, champs.
Yeah, see you. Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye.
See you on